Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest today is veteran live sound engineer and Hello TV co-founder Erik Rogers. E-Rock, how you doing?
I like veteran. That was pretty cool. You're the first one to ever call me a veteran.
Actually, we used to have this running joke with a lot of the editors that I worked with on a regular basis. We called it, the cliche contest. And we would always like joke about things like, how many cliches can you get into a single press release? There were things like groundbreaking, innovative, state of the art, cutting edge,
boardroom lingo stuff.
Yep. And the one that always scored extra brownie points was industry veteran, because anytime you had somebody like because in our industry, of course, there's really only about 500 jobs, and everybody just plays musical chairs every few years. So you run into somebody at a trade show, and one of the first questions is, "So where are you working now?" And so a lot of times we would get these press releases, and it would be industry veteran so and so is now over at So that's one of my favorite cliches right there. So I'm glad you liked it.
I like it because it gives me this weird feeling that, first of all, I just had a conversation with somebody this morning reminding me that September 11th, 2001 was 20 years ago this year. And 2001 is around about the time I started touring. So I've been doing this 20 years. And the engineers and the audio guys that I looked up to 20 years ago, they're still doing it, and they're still way better than me. But then I just look back, because I'm doing it in 20 years, and now I get to have conversations with these guys as friends. So calling me a veteran makes me feel like I'm part of the club.
You're in the club now, man. Yeah. Well, and by way of background, let's for the non-veterans in our audience, you have toured with. Give me sort of a really 30,000 foot itinerary of what tours you've done in the last 10 or 20 years.
Okay, let's see. As well, I started off working for the sound company. I worked for Thunder Audio for years. So like my first tour with them was a Broadway tour, right? off Broadway tour, and then I did another off Broadway tour, and then I went straight into Avenged Sevenfold, Deep Purple, Rod Stewart, Taylor Swift, Metallica, somebody else for Thunder, I don't remember. And then I kind of graduated into it and moved on into being my own independent, just audio engineer, just front of house guy, not being as much of a systems guy, with Saving Abel, Apocalyptica, Scott Stapp, shit, I'm drawing a blank, Avenged Sevenfold, Dustin Lynch, Ed Kowalczyk from Live.
So a very eclectic mix of people.
Why did I forget Godsmack? They're the most recent one.
Yeah, don't forget them. Yeah, but yeah, you've obviously. What I like is that you've done this. Because it's interesting when you say Thunder Audio, everybody thinks of Paul first. But everybody thinks metal, because that's anybody who's ever worked for Thunder Audio has done Metallica at some point or another.
Yep.
But you've had kind of a wide spread eclectically, which is interesting. Now, I know that your background is as a musician, so let me ask you the obvious. What's that?
I'm not a musician. I'm a really shitty guitar player who just never found a band to play with because they all found better players.
And that's kind of that's kind of what I was working my way into, is a question of a lot of musicians end up in sound for various reasons. Either they don't have confidence in their own playing compared to all the other people they're around, or they just happen to be the guy with the truck, or but a lot of times it's because you're kind of drawn to the whole left brain engineering thing. What was your entry point?
My honestly, my entry point was I just wanted to be in a band. I just wanted to just be in a metal band or a punk band, and just wanted to be part of that scene. I had no, I didn't I never thought I would be a rock star or anything like that. I wanted free beer and girls. And I'm not a very good player, and any of the bands that were actually successful in Dayton, Ohio, where I had, they were more pop or modern rock, or like that late 90s alt rock cover band kind of deal. And
Skinny tie bands.
the
Skinny tie bands.
Yeah. And the girl I was dating at the time, her best friend's ex-husband was the drummer for a local band. And they introduced me to this guy. Next thing you know, I'm driving the box truck and loading the gear, and I'm underage. I'm a child at this point. I'm 19 or whatever, pushing gear in and out of this thing, and that grew over a couple of years. And the band was notoriously cheap, so they stopped hiring the local sound company that would come in with racks and stacks at all these venues. And he bought the PA system, and it was, whatever you can imagine, like the shitty music store PA system. And I remember vividly the conversation, like, well, who's going to mix it? And like, well, Erik can. And I'm like, Erik can what? Erik can do what? And I ended up shadowing. There's this club in Cincinnati that's gone now. It's called Jefferson Hall, actually. No, it's called Rhythm and Blues Cafe. My bad. It was right next door to Jefferson Hall. And the house engineer there, his name was Alan Cand. He was also front of house for Bootsy Collins. And I would go down there. We would play a show on, say, a Friday, but they had shows 5 days a week. And I would go down. I had, after my normal job, I would go down to Cincinnati, which is like a 45-minute drive, and just shadow him. And he kind of took me under his wing, teaching me how the gear worked, but he never taught me how to listen. What the conversation would come down is, I would look at him and make a comment of something like, that bass sounds muddy. Why is that guitar so thin? Why is his voice buried? And instead of being a complete asshole about it, like, well, come back here. Like, here's the lever that you push, or here's the knob that you twist to make that change that you want. Twist that till it sounds right. So then I would do that, and then I would, what is this piece of gear? And next thing you know, I've got my hands on a DBX 168. And now he's telling me what this compressor does, and what these needles are telling me, what these lights are telling me. So I never learned how to hear music. That was something that I always had, and I still believe that's something you have it or you don't, or everybody hears things in their own way. I just learned how to use the gear. Since I was a nerd and I studied physics and I studied music, I kind of understood all these things. I just had I had Alan and then a couple other guys later on down the way teach me how to use the gear and what all this stuff was. And 20 years later, I'm still falling down the rabbit hole.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, there is this whole sort of left brain, right brain spectrum between, the hardcore tech heads who don't necessarily listen, but they watch the meters incessantly. And then, on the other side, there are the people who just know how to listen and don't really understand the gear. And, when I was in the studio, we'd have people, I'd have a guitar player ask me things like, can you make my guitar sound more brown? And,
right.
But there needs to be sort of, someone in the middle there that can translate those two sides to each other.
I think that's who we are, because as the artists on stage, they're creating music, and you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have super nerds that are making these amazing sound systems that are whatever, and microphones and outboard devices and all this cool gadgetry that requires a slide rule, a pocket protector, and never a girlfriend. And somehow in the middle, you need somebody to translate that. And that's what we are. That's what, like as a front of house engineer, the band trusts me to transparently or creatively, or whatever, pick your adjective, translate what they're doing on stage through speakers to an audience that wants to hear it. The audience either trusts or believes that I have as good, if not better, taste in music than they do. And the tech people need me to implement their technology to make all of that happen. So we are basically the hub in this web of music.
And to a certain extent, I mean, even though, as you mentioned, the audience has certain expectations, to a certain extent, you're almost the invisible link.
Until
Because, I mean, I would say, 50% of the audience doesn't even know you're there.
again,
Who's that guy standing in the middle with that big,
But there's things like, I had something, we were in Germany last year. Last year is 2019.
Last year didn't happen. Yeah.
Right. Last year is still 2019. We were in Germany, and it's literally the first time in my career I've ever had a literally catastrophic failure of a piece of gear. And it was a catastrophic failure of a Cat5 cable. And somehow, like, the intro of the show runs, and as soon as downbeat happened, the Cat5, the RJ45 inside between the neutron brain of my Pro X and the DL231 shook just loose enough not to kill the sound, but to make this god awful, just as loud as the PA would go. Just this solid. It sounded like a foghorn. It was just awful. And thankfully the console mute button responded, and I could kill it. But everybody in the room knew exactly who the hell I was. and it was cool. It took a minute to fix. I mean, it's a Midas Pro X. Technically, it's still booting up a year later, but it took a minute to fix, and we went on. The band didn't freak out. No, everybody was totally professional. It was good, but there was that moment. You're right.
Longest 60 seconds of your life, right?
And I've had a similar 60 seconds to that, where I had a catastrophic console failure at monitors, and those 60 seconds that the console was rebooting was the first and only minute in Stevie Wonder's life that he could see, and he was staring at me. But outside of that, you're right, nobody knows who we are until shit goes wrong, and then they forget who you are as soon as you correct the problem.
It's true. But it is, I mean, those times notwithstanding, it is definitely, it's a really interesting role to play, being that interface between, allowing the artist to be an artist and not have to think about any of that stuff, and being able to translate all that stuff, and use these, as you say, these tools that were designed by, guys with huge pocket protectors, and use them as instruments. I mean, you're basically, you're using left brain tools in a right brain fashion.
Yeah, well, it's convenient because I actually am right brained. It's funny you bring that up. It made me think of something I haven't thought about in a lifetime, but when I was really young in elementary school, my third grade teacher got this book called Unicorns Are Real. And it was a right brain guide to learning, because she had never dealt with a kid like me. And for better or worse, I guess I was a difficult child. But
weren't we all?
I didn't understand until a long time. And I never really talk about it because it's just kind of, I'm 43. I just go through life now. But there's a completely different mindset on the creative side of your brain to the analytical side of your brain. And to bring it all together, you're absolutely right. What we as audio engineers or front of house engineers are is we're that wrinkle in the middle of the brain that skirts that gap between the analytical and the creative.
It's true. And I think, I mean, I've had conversations with people who say, it's somehow or another on the ADHD spectrum. I don't really know, I mean, you can speculate on that stuff all you want. When I was growing up, we didn't call it ADHD. We just called it awkward, But it's true. It's the ability to really be empathic enough to see both sides of that equation, the left brain and the right brain.
And be comfortable enough to take criticism from both sides as well. And I always default to, what does it sound like? Mm-hmm. Where the artist has certain expectations, and I may not be using a piece of gear to the exacting specifications or to what the manufacturer had in mind, but the end result is a big happy audience, happy artist, happy bank account. I don't care if the microphone's inside, outside, upside down, backwards. I don't care. I'm going to find a new way to use this piece of gear until it works.
Well, it's interesting. I used to I used to write this column for Universal Audio, and it was mostly, studio tips and tricks and stuff like that, but I used to conclude every single article with the same basic premise, which was, no matter what I just said, the last 1,200 words, it doesn't matter unless it sounds good. So forget the meters, forget the technical stuff, use your ears. And, so everything that we're doing on that left brain side, all of that technical stuff, you're right. It's all for the purpose of creating the art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that we wanted to talk was that, you and I talked last year when the shutdown started happening, and, there was a whole lot of conversation, and of course there still is, about the most overused word of 2020 is pivot. Yes, indeed. But you guys, you really did pivot. And what I mean by that is, to me, I think one of the most essential things about being a creative individual is being able to evolve. And, another overused word, reinvent. But, you guys basically, you found yourself in a situation where, like many people in live sound, all of a sudden, not only were a few gigs canceled, but life was canceled for the entire year. And, you came up with a way to make lemonade out of it. So, let's talk about Hello TV a little bit.
I'd love to, and I want to. Pivoting is such a weird word, because I think it trivializes most people. Like, there's some people you pivot, like there's a story about a lady here in Nashville who had another job and pandemic killed it, and now she's become a fish importer for sushi in Hawaii. That to me is a pivot. Like, she went from a career in music or whatever she was doing to a career selling sushi. That's a pivot. For a front of house guy and a photographer to start a video company isn't a pivot nearly as much as it's an evolution.
It's an evolution, yeah. And we talk about the idea of, if you talk about various species on our planet, the ones that evolve are the ones that survive.
Yeah, you're right.
That's true of what you're, the same way you're talking about this. I mean, you took something that integrated all of the talents that you already had, you and Paris both, and Paris being your partner.
You should come say hi.
Nah.
Okay. Paris is Erik's partner in Hello TV. She is a videographer, and she is presently camera shy. So, which just makes sense, because, audio guys can't figure out how to get sound out of things. So therefore, video people should always be camera shy. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Talk to the hand. Okay. So that said, tell me about how this whole idea evolved.
This idea evolved from the need to do something. Touring had canceled. So I was looking at a couple of different tours to do. Paris had just taken a job with the New England Patriots at the time, and we were looking at a year of doing our creative thing, and all of a sudden pandemic hits and whammo, it's done. And I watched and I don't know who's watching this, so I'm going to be very delicate. I watched the first telethon that was done on broadcast TV. It was in early March or mid-March, I guess, of a bunch of superstars, like amazing superstars, doing this 24-hour fundraiser telethon that was really cool for, and I don't remember what they were raising funds for, maybe for research or pandemic or something. But it was the concept was fantastic, and the production was less than stellar. And I make the joke about it. It was phoned in, because all of we had been shut down and people had been locked in their homes, and there was a quarantine going on. So now we have super megastars doing their hit song through an iPhone and through a GoPro. And I remember talking to Paris, like, did you see this telethon thing? And she's like, no, should I? And she watched it, and then we were no bullshit, we were playing Call of Duty about 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, so what did you think about that? And she's like, what do you think? I'm like, we could do this better. And that was all born out of looking at just the upper echelon of our industry being reduced to doing shows on their iPhone, and thinking like, wait a minute, I've built a lot of relationships in this business over the years, and she's built a lot of relationships in this business over the years. And it wasn't even like a let's leverage a relationship kind of mindset. It was like, I'm going to call my friends and I'm going to see if I can put this thing together, because I have this great idea that we can make these shows, and we can make these shows better. Because the audience went from being engulfed in music. Like, you go to a show and the lights and the sound and the energy is just all around you. So now you're sitting in front of your laptop, and you're cooking dinner at the same time, and all your favorite bands are in the background. The least we could do is try to make it as immersive as possible.
Now, did you have any previous experience with live streaming and those kind of technologies?
None.
So a lot of this was really learning on the job.
I take it back. What I have is on tour. I've done pretty much every late night and early morning TV show there is. So like I've done the SNLs, I've done the Conans, the Kimmels, the Good Morning America, the Fox and Friends. I've done all this. So I kind of had my head around broadcast mixing, because I made friends with all of the broadcast engineers that were at all those networks. But
it's a lot different to all of a sudden be that guy, as opposed to just giving a feed to the broadcast truck.
It's a lot different from being that guy, but it was also pretty cool, because we didn't approach, since I didn't know anything about live streaming, and I see some of my friends and colleagues, they're doing the same thing we're doing now, and they're doing it much different. They're doing it in a, let's call it an in the box kind of way, where I noticed last year there's a whole lot of technology immediately came on the market of, hey, buy this widget and plug it into your computer, and whammo, you're a live stream company, and this will auto switch your camera and it'll normalize your audio, and off you go. And I had no experience with that. The only experience I had was mixing full on rock shows. So what did we do? We put together a full on rock show, and we mixed it like it's a rock show, and then we put it, Paris edits it, and we don't do it together. So all the feeds come separately. She edits it in post, more like a movie. Then she adds the audio, marries it all together to one large format thing, and then it goes out the same way you would distribute a movie or a TV show. So we never put it together for live streaming. We put it together for broadcast.
But now, for both of you, this was kind of a brand new experience, learning all this technology on the job, so to speak, right? 100%,
it was. I remember, and I'm sure Paris remembers too. Like, there was this fear going into, like, we were lucky. Everything just come falling into place. Like the first space that we had, it was given to us. Actually, every space, like performance space, was given to us, donated. All of our consoles, like all of our lights. Our artists, like our first art, I called friends that I had toured with before and said, hey, man, you got this new project. Let's do this thing. Everybody said yes. And everybody had this faith in us that, it's Erik and Paris. It's going to be great. And then we get to building the set, and we're very confident this is going to be awesome. And then it's like the day before our first shoot, and I don't think either one of us slept. And then we get there, and it was a whirlwind day, and I barely remember it. I just remember being terrified. Like, what went wrong? What did we not do right? Is this all going to work? And the first one we recorded was actually the fourth one we streamed. So we kind of put that in the can, and then we had another one recorded the second day. And fortunately, the second day we had was an acoustic show, and that was a much easier, less hectic experience, where we could kind of do it, and it was ready to go as soon as we were done, and sit back on it and go, I think we can do this. But there was that 48 hours of fear.
So you're not streaming any of these in real time live then?
None. They're not streamed real time live. We edit in post. We work with the artist. We haven't found a benefit to live. There's a perceived benefit of live that the artist and the audience somehow think that they're connected, but you can create that same connection pre-recorded just with a better script and working with the artist. And we do things like we work with the artist, I don't ever talk to the artist. Paris works with the artist directing the show. If you go to hellotv.com and you click on there's a link somewhere to watch our videos. You can see that the differences in every show that we've done, the artist plays to the camera, and she really works with them as a director, working with the artist. We do a full rehearsal before the actual show, coaching the artist, like, look at this camera. This camera is that kid in the front row. That camera is the super fan that's wearing all of your merch and knows all of your stats. Play to them. Play it up. Like every stupid face you make, every time you give me somebody the come hither eyes, like all that shit is behind that lens. Do it. And that's the magic of what we do, is taking this completely disconnected medium and making a connection. And we figured that the connection is actually in the art, in the music, and not in the technology. So there's no actual need to go live. And live, you're limited by bandwidth, you're limited by resolution of whatever medium is going to let you go, or to what limit that medium is going to let you go. We can do it. We can shoot in 4K and we can stream it later. And then the artist can actually engage with the crowd in real time, because there's always a chat window. So now
that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
There's a total chat window. We did this, we did for the band Newfound Glory. We did their Christmas special, and it was 100% pre-recorded. And the band loves to get into the chat room with the audience. So, and it was like, there's some live performance and some skits, and it was this crazy, cute Christmas special thing. And we're watching the comments live, and I'm not really a good internet commenter anyway. I take all the bad ones too seriously, so I don't watch them.
Yeah,
but
not on the internet, man.
Right, exactly. You can't take it personally, but I do. But eventually somebody goes, I don't think this is live. And then somebody else goes like, duh, of course it's not live. And then one of the band guys chimes in on the conversation, and it's like, well, wait a minute. How can he be commenting now if he's playing? Who cares? He's talking to us right now. And then now they're engaging with the artist while they're watching the show. And it's the best of both worlds. I mean, how many times do you get to go see your favorite band play and talk to them at the same time?
Sure. And you know, for people like us who have been involved in producing live shows, we know that, you know, the last time, the time when you absolutely cannot talk to the artist is when they're working. You know, That's the last time you want to have any kind of conversation with anybody on stage. You want to keep that interchange to a minimum. So, you know, my compliments to you guys, not only on the idea of, yeah, you are doing it right after the fact. I think that's really great. First of all, because as you say, Paris really does teach them about interacting with the camera, which I think a lot of artists don't really get. You know, a lot of artists are you know, they come up through the idea of interacting directly with the audience and looking at the random audience person in the audience, whatever it is. And so I think being able to get them to play to the camera, that's a newfound skill for a lot of them. And then also the idea that because you're not doing it live, you get the opportunity to, you know, choreograph it later by editing, you know, no, I like this shot better. And, oh, you know, right here at this particular moment, that camera was catching the magic, and I might not have caught that if I was streaming it live.
There's also, there's little moments. If you watch all of our videos, there's cool little moments. There's a couple things that I like to watch for, because I know what the editing process is now, and I know what she's looking for. But at some point in the show, there's always a musician who's not the singer, who kind of looks directly in the camera and gives a little wink or a smile or a funny face.
Yep.
put that in there. You know, there's all these little bits of personality that when you're doing the big arena production, and I've seen them, and some of them are my friends, where their band just brought in their arena show into a facility, and they recorded their normal rehearsed show, and then they taped it and streamed it, and it was great. It's just like I remembered. It's just like whatever it was, except you had that point of view of being up in the 300 section of the arena.
Yeah.
And instead of with Hello TV, you have the point of view of there's nothing between you and the artist. We don't do any of those big shots that show the overhead. You don't see the rigging. You don't see the lighting rig. You don't see the empty room. You barely see the ceiling of the venue that we're in. You see the band.
It's all about the artist.
What they're doing, and it's all about that connection between an artist, or between the artist, the music, and the fan.
Yeah, and that, I think, is really, you know, it's a big part of it. Years ago, I used to work. I worked the Montreux Jazz Festival for a number of years, and one of the things that I was always really impressed about with that show is that they were light years ahead of anyone else in terms of how they did their video production. And you know, I was always fascinated by the idea that there's one person, one camera person who's up on stage, and at that particular moment, all of a sudden, you know, they're like shadowing the drummer or the bass player, you know, at that moment when you might not be looking there. And especially if you're, you know, up in nosebleed territory in the, you know, in the cheap seats or whatever, you know, you're not going to see those moments. But you know, and even if you're looking on the big screen, you're not going to see those moments. But if that person, if that camera person is there and captures that moment, like you're talking about, where, you know, they may be just grooving or winking at the camera or whatever, that's going to deliver a completely different experience for somebody watching the show.
It is. And then we kind of, the 1-2 punch is we marry it with immersive audio, where it's not just a stereo mix that I'm putting out.
Thank you. That was, you just segued into my next topic of conversation. You've done this before.
I'm sorry. I forgot it's your show.
No. I'm so glad you're making it so easy for me. Thank you. I wanted to talk about immersive audio because the other thing about immersive is it's a new art form in itself too. And, you know, there's 100 different standards these days for, you know, what kind of immersive are you, you know, are you doing, you know, Atmos? Are you doing the earcam thing? Are you doing L-acoustics version? Or, you know, I mean, there's a ton of different ways to execute this. So the way I was going to bring this up was just, you know, for you as a mixer, how has this, you know, first of all, how did you first get the concept of doing this? You know, and obviously you're doing it in a binaural fashion. So how are you without getting too deep down the technical rabbit hole, how are you executing it?
Well, how I got into it was pretty simple. Is like when we first started putting this whole thing together, I called Matt Larson at Digico.
Oh, of course.
Asked him to give me
Yes.
I asked him to give me a console, and he gave me 2. But he was like, the caveat was you have to mix it in Klang. Like, okay, how is this in-ear monitoring thing going to work for this? And he and I actually never hashed out what his idea was. I'm pretty sure he thought that I was going to put the Klang in our monitor world and have Mike, our monitor guy, dial up a 3D in-ear mix for every new band that came in the studio. And
that's how it's designed. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I didn't have to ask Mike to know what his answer to that would have been. So I'm like, I'll figure this out. And I put in there, and I got to thinking that the demo for Klang on the YouTube page, you listen to it over the internet, and you listen to it in headphones over the internet, and whatever the technology is translating over streaming. So there's no reason whatsoever that I couldn't do the same thing on ours and embed the audio that way. Ideally, I never got to do what my ideal situation was, where I wanted to have the 3D immersive mix on the primary audio channel, and then as a backup have just a stereo mix on the secondary channel. So you hit the secondary audio button and instead of hearing it in Spanish, you heard it just in a collapsed stereo feed. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I don't think I care to anymore. That was just kind of an early onset pipe dream. But it all came from, like, use this thing, and I never used it. I didn't really set it. They came in and showed me how to connect it to the network, because I like to think I'm a pretty good audio guy, but I'm a really shitty IT guy. And there are in that thing right there, there's like 3 different IP addresses. So it's
Yep.
talking all over the place, and I don't get it. That's some propeller head shit. But it was figuring out where and how to put things in space where I felt comfortable with it. Because I understand, I had spoken to a couple of monitor guys that use it. I talked to the monitor guy for Ghost and talked about how Tobias from Ghost has everything like perfectly spaced out in his head, how he wants it. And it's not necessarily to the visual relationship of the audience, it's to his relationship with his band behind him. So if the drums are way over here, then the drums are way over here, and all this, it's for him to perform. And that didn't really make sense to me. So my approach with using this thing was, I'm looking at a band, I'm in the front row, the speakers are way over here, and some front fills are maybe here, or however they've got that going on. And I started putting that mix together in a way that it sounds to me in an arena, where it's got this huge amount of space between things, and there's some definite panning, and the vocal is somewhere on top, and the drums are down here and behind, and that bass is punchy and right here in your face. The effects are on a separate bus send and slightly delayed, because you want to hear that reverb off of the back wall. I don't want to just make it sound like a Verby snare drum or whatever traditional effects you use. I'm trying to recreate that environment. And so far what I've managed to do is create that live feel without room mics. So I can actually close mic things so it sounds like a studio, and then I can use the clang to give it some space so it sounds like a room.
Well, and that's interesting because, I have talked to a lot of, we work with Immersive on a lot of different levels, and, a couple of different companies that have used it. And, there's a whole lot of different approaches to Immersive. Some people use it as a gimmick, where you just swirl stuff around just for the hell of it and stuff like that. But, we did some shoots with a 360 camera, and I had a band on a circular stage, and you'd put on the Oculus headset, and then as you turn towards a certain musician, that sound became louder because it's that binaural effect. But I think what you're doing is very similar in terms of, you're not using it as a gimmick, you're using it to really create a room sound, so to speak.
I am, and I'm actually really bummed. Robert Scoble had his weekly Tech Nerd Zoom meeting. I think it was yesterday, and it was about Immersive, and I couldn't. I had an artist in here, so I couldn't check it. I want to go check his clip note, because I'm sure those guys are talking about more room immersive stuff, the stuff that Acoustics was doing with Lisa and all that. But
yeah,
it's not a gimmick. I'm not trying to. We're not trying to be kitschy about it.
Right. You don't want guitars swirling around your head and stuff like that. Yeah.
Not at all. What we're trying to do is we're trying to literally create something immersive. They call it immersive, but marrying what's going on with the camera with what's going on with the audio, you can create. And I think we very effectively created this environment where we can turn your living room into a concert hall. And if talk to the people at Meyer or Acoustics or your favorite speaker company, because they all have stuff that'll fit in your house and run off of 110. You could effectively stream our show, plug it into some pretty good speakers, and get it loud, and there'd be no audible difference between the rock show in the venue and the rock show in your living room. And if you have a big enough TV, probably look pretty good too.
Yeah, except you won't have somebody standing in front of you and holding their iPhone right in your way or anything like that. It's kind of cool.
We could hire somebody to run through the house and trip and spill a beer on somebody.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Why not? So now that you've done a bunch of these shows, you know, the question that everybody asks is, you know, in terms of, and of course we're all speculating, but everybody's waiting for live sound to come back. Everybody's waiting to be able to go to a show again. Now that you've done a bunch of these shows, do you feel that your perspective on doing live shows has changed? I mean, how would you compare the experiences?
The first thing I will say is my Clang mix, the 3D immersive mix, translates to my near field monitor. So in headphones, it's immersive. In the near fields, it's just wide and full. So in a perfect world, when we're all if I'm back on tour mixing a band, I will have this thing in my front of house rack, because the difference is huge. And I have no problem creating using the same mix, creating a VIP mix for somebody with a set of in-ears at front of house, and the audience just gets the benefit of all the space that's created with that device. Like I'm convinced that it's right, and I was playing in the studio today with just listening to tracks that I did, and I was standing like 20 feet away from the monitors and going back and forth between stereo and 3D, and it's still there. I mean, I can't hear all the space, and I definitely can't hear something behind me, but there's the magic in the box is still there, and the immersive sound is here to stay.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was having this conversation with somebody recently about the idea that, you know, live sound and concerts will sort of evolve. And, you know, one of the things that I was opining about, and of course, you know, I can pontificate as well as the next person, but, you know, my thought was, you will probably find certain venues that are going to create, if they haven't already, VIP suites. And in those VIP suites, you would have your immersive audio, so that, you know, maybe you're right there at the concert, but maybe you want to have, you know, maybe you want to close the glass and just be partying with your crew in your little booth or whatever, you know?
You know, there's a technology, and that, like, this isn't a plug or anything like that. I'm not connected to them at all, but there's an app called Mixhalo. And I learned about it a few years ago at of all places, an Incubus show. And it's this cool thing where your phone is connected to a private Wi-Fi network that is also connected to a mix from the front of house desk. And now I'm listening to the show in earbuds instead of through the PA. Now I'm also, I mean, I had tickets like 3 rows back, so the PA is still louder than my iPhone. But I took a walk around the concourse. I went around different places just so I could listen to it. And I don't know, like PA manufacturers might not like this, but I see a time sometime in the future where we can do full shows like that. You use the immersive mix, and then you use some sort of private high-speed internet thing through your phone, because not everybody can have an in-ear pack at the venue. You can't buy 20,000 in-ear packs and give them to people, but everybody's got a phone. And plugging your headphones into your phone and experiencing the show with zero or very little latency in an immersive mix, is it going to be the rock festival that pounds your skull in? No. And those are always going to exist, but maybe you can have that certain private immersive event. I know that like Bonaroo calls it a silent disco, where they have a DJ spinning and there's no speakers out there, and you have a bunch of tweaker kids with headphones on, you know, dancing and staring blindly.
You have done too many shows, man.
But I think there's a space for that moving forward, and I think that the cool thing, if you look at 2020 as just this clusterfuck of catastrophe, we're looking at it wrong. If you look at 2020 as an opportunity to innovate and grow, there's no reason that the live streaming market isn't here to stay, that immersive technology isn't here to stay, that everything that we've developed because we had to can't be integrated into what we already know and grow and move forward and give artists and audience an even broader range of ways to connect.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You mentioned Bonaroo. Um, I was having a conversation recently with somebody about Coachella, and that there is, of course, you have your younger fans who will gladly get into a mosh pit anytime, and they don't mind traipsing over 400 other people in some mud and stuff like that. But then you also have, how shall I put this kindly, your slightly older and more jaded concert goers, who may show up in their luxury RV and do the whole glamping experience and everything, and,
Oh,
for those people, they are probably just as content to, hear the show in immersive and be there. And so, I kind of wonder, I mean, from your perspective, now having done both, obviously you don't want to necessarily have to choose between one or the other, but, there's a certain versatility now where you could go on the road with somebody, or you could just remotely produce it, or both in the same.
The thing is I don't have to choose. Like right now, that's what I'm saying. Like I will take the same binaural immersive feed that I'm putting into the live stream mix, that we flash a little thing on the screen. This is put on your headphones. That also goes to your laptop speakers, and it's the same. It's not the same experience. But it's the same source.
But it's a different experience, and the fact that it's a different experience, by virtue of that, that's different too. It's like when you go to a museum and you have the guided tour in your headphones or something like that. It's not the same experience, but it's a different option to experience the same thing.
But it's coming off of the same console.
Yep.
So an artist can have both, and it's something you could. The right artist, the right manager, the right promoter could upsell that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not telling anybody how to do their job, but there's
right. It's a premium service, man.
Premium service, and people want to consume. They really do. I mean, there's a reason that you can have an acoustic guitar in a Venmo account and make $5,000 in a week. It just happens. I mean, you have to have good songs and have a little bit of talent, but people really want to consume. They really, really, really want this art. And something that I've noticed over the course of a pandemic and the subsequent economic meltdown, people are still willing to spend money to be entertained.
People still want experiences. Yeah.
It's almost like a psychological need. It's like a drug.
Yeah.
And we've been stuck at home. We've listening to miserable, awful news. It's just doom and gloom all the time. All of a sudden, oh wow, Paul McCartney's doing a thing. Yeah, let's go. How much is it? Don't care.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think it's interesting because you have sort of you're on the cutting edge, to use another cliche here.
You should have a bingo board. This is see where you're at.
It's true, man. It's true. But really, you're sort of on the edge of marrying new technologies together with old, and that's kind of cool because in addition to being able to provide a different experience for the show attendee, you're creating a whole different experience for yourself as a mixer.
Yeah, I find myself really getting it. It's if I have to remix something, I'm happy about it because I'm not just listening to the one thing that I didn't like. All of a sudden, I'm sculpting it, like literally in the clang here. It's sculpting a mix instead of throwing faders up and just making it, however we used to do. And I don't mean to like trivialize my career for the last 20 years because I've only been doing clang for a year now. But it's instead of crafting a mix in a traditional way of making the band sound as natural as possible within the left-right realm, all of a sudden I have the ability to make the band sound like I think they do if I'm standing in the middle of the stage. Mm-hmm. And the drums are here in front of me, and the bass player's over there, and the guitar player's over there, and the singer's behind me, and I can hear it I could do that. If his wedge is behind me, I can put his voice back and down there, and I can create that. I mean, just imagine being in the middle of, say, Motorhead stage. I could make it that kind of loud chaos isolation thing. I can do that. Or I can make it more like if you look at if you can visualize how I pan things, the only things behind in my mix are the effects because the band is all from here forward.
Sure. So what's behind you is just basically the natural sound of the room, as if you're standing at front of house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's technology. We've never really had the ability to do that, and we've always been limited by the fact that all that stuff on stage has to come out of those speakers.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes up with, well, we could put speakers here, all across here, and that'll make it a little bit cooler. And then the movie theater people figured it out right away. We put speakers all around here. And that never translated to live. I mean, I know that I think Buford did it with Pink Floyd and Quadraphonic, which I never got to hear. I'm so bummed. But it never really caught on. And I think that now the technology is getting smaller and faster and more readily. I mean, I can't imagine how much processing it took to do Pink Floyd and Quadraphonic.
Well, and that's just it. You know, the technology has finally caught up with what we wanted to do creatively.
Yeah, now it's a 2-space rack unit.
Yeah, that's pretty scary if you think about it.
With a really cool German guy who knows everything about it when you screw it up. Then still.
On that note, yeah, I mean, I love what you guys are doing. Hello TV. That's how many O's are there in that?
There's 3 O's. HELLOOTV.com. There's a .com after it as well.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll direct everybody to check that out. Erik Rogers, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for being my guest.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to see your face.
Likewise. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.